Under a Trump administration, no American citizen will ever again feel that their needs come second to the citizens of a foreign country. We will no longer surrender this country or its people to the false song of globalism.
So I just finished 2 videos about Trump and the upcoming election and everything that's going on and why it's so important to vote for him. And now I want to talk a little bit about what's happening in Europe and some of the people who are responsible for what's happening. Because right now Europe is being flooded with migrants from the world's worst shitholes. And I mentioned in my last video, it's all part of an agenda that's being pushed by the EU, the globalists, and all its elitist backers. And the agenda is to essentially create a Europe without borders. But not just Europe. They want a world without borders where, they're in charge, of course. And this is actually their agenda, as crazy as it sounds. Don't believe me? Well, listen to John Kerry slip it into this commencement speech.
You're about to graduate into a complex and borderless world. Almost cliche to say that you have global vision. Northeastern's gone global. Our leading corporations are going global. Health and medicine and film are going global because this university is blessed with a global vision, because you're entering a world where thinking globally is absolutely essential to...
It's really weird, isn't it? And, this is common knowledge, by the way. I mean, a lot of people are talking about this. It's out there. The globalists, it's a legit word now. I mean, it's so fucking weird. And this is how these people spread their toxic message. They slip it into different forms of media. And, here it is on Big Think. This woman is a Homeland Security analyst or, some such. And she has this, really weird, ambiguous message. She just goes on for, 4 minutes about how, after 9/11, we were just, we were so xenophobic and just overly fearful of terrorism. And, we can't prevent all terrorism. We just have to accept those kinds of risks.
The idea after 9/11 that never again was going to be our standard, right? Never again. I understand that. We were traumatized. And it was delusional. And that those risks are just ones that we have to accept.
Oh my God! Holy shit!
That those risks are just ones that we have to accept. This country is all about flow, about the flow of people and goods and ideas. And the more security apparatus you put on it, the less we will be able to be the kind of citizens we want to be, or that nothing that the government could do was ever going to help us, and these guys are just right-wing fanatics who want to put up walls everywhere.
And hiding behind walls at a time that technology has made that impossible to do and unwise to even attempt.
The idea that any security apparatus is going to stop that guy is just, it's delusional. And
well, that sure is a strange defeatist approach to terrorism. Is this what we have working at Homeland Security? And, feel free to go watch the whole thing in case you think I took it out of context or something like that. Link in description. This is the same kind of thinking that is crushing Europe right now. This is the agenda being pushed down from on top. The globalists, the New World Order, the EU, the Bilderberg motherfuckers. I used to think, all this shit was just some crazy Alex Jones nonsense, but it's all real. It's all happening. I'm not the only one talking about it. Go watch Sargon of Akkad, Paul Joseph Watson. I mean, it's out there. You could look it up for yourself. These people want the whole world to be one big, shitty, third world country. It's totally cool for them, though, because they'll be the ones in charge. They'll be the ones running it. Get it? That's what this whole EU Brexit vote was all about. And I can't tell you how happy I am that they voted to leave and how important that is, but more on that later. And I'm no expert on European politics, but I do know a political power move when I see one. And make no mistake, that's what this is all about, power. These people in the EU just want to sit on their thrones, tell everyone else what to do, and have all the other Euro nations send their tax dollars to them. Don't you peasants worry. Just send us your money, and after we take our cut, we'll let you have some of it back, after we decide how you're allowed to spend it. And these assholes are literally tyrants. I mean, that's how they run their ship. When Euro nations vote to reject their mandates, the EU just makes them vote again, or they just ignore the vote. It's fucking bizarre.
I've heard it said that the EU is undemocratic. It's not undemocratic, it's anti-democratic. Look at how the European Union responds when citizens in Europe vote to reject its mandates. In Denmark, Ireland, France, the Netherlands, Greece, the people voted to reject the Maastricht Treaty, to reject the Nice Treaty, to reject the EU Constitution, to reject the Lisbon Treaty, to reject the Euro bailout. And every time the EU either made them vote again to get the result they wanted, or simply ignored the vote altogether. Listen to what Jean-Luc Dehaene, the former Belgian Prime Minister, said about a referendum on the EU Constitution. If the answer is no, the vote will probably have to be done again, because it absolutely has to be a yes.
If you want to learn a little bit more about the EU, that's a pretty good video. Paul Joseph Watson lays it out pretty good. These assholes are basically like the Nazi Party version 2.0. You know, minus all the genocide, of course, but their goals are basically the same. They want to rule over a borderless Europe and eventually a borderless world, but, you know, they'll start with Europe first. They want all your tax dollars. They want to control everything and everyone. And, you know, they're not really answerable to anyone. Most of them are not even fucking elected. They even want their own army. I mean, doesn't that sound eerily familiar?
When I raised this last year with the Deputy Prime Minister, Liberal Democrat Nick Clegg, he said it was a dangerous fantasy to even talk about an EU army. I hope every Liberal Democrat voter has heard Mr Verhofstadt today, the leader of the European Liberals, crying out for militarisation at an EU level.
These people are fucking monsters. They seem to think that they just own the world. It's the same old story of power that's been told time and time again. Just a lesson of history that we keep having to learn over and over. Never underestimate the lengths that tyrants will go to in order to hold on to their power. These people have all but destroyed Europe by flooding it with millions of ideologically insane and hostile people that have aggressively pushed that backwards ideology onto the rest of the public. It is fucking disgraceful what these monsters have done to this beautiful continent. I mean, look at this shit. All over Europe. They have amazing landscapes and just incredible architecture. America, for all its greatness, can't even hold a candle to this shit. This type of architectural beauty. And this stuff has historical roots going back centuries. I mean, this is the history of white people. Yeah, I said it. White people. Oh, it's so awful. I mean, we have so much to be guilty for, don't we? Creating Western civilization. All these amazing fucking castles all over Europe. I mean, most of this stuff was created centuries ago. I mean, they don't create things like this these days. Nobody has time for this. But back then, I mean, there's just nothing else to do except focus on this stuff. They were creating monuments to their societies, just all over Europe. It is amazing. And throughout the centuries, they have preserved this beauty. But now, the EU motherfuckers have let in these monsters who just want to blow it up, destroy it, take it over. You know, thanks a lot, guys. I mean, who the fuck do you think you are? You do not have a right to destroy this culture, this continent, for your own selfish greed and whatever the fuck you guys are up to.
Their goal, nothing short of Muslim domination of the United Kingdom, if not the world.
This poster is basically showing how we will transform Buckingham Palace into a local mosque for the Muslims.
And what happens to the Queen?
Well, the Queen, she has a choice. She can either become Muslim or she can leave the country.
Oh, well, isn't that cute? Don't worry, though. I'm sure he doesn't mean it. Jesus Christ. Great job, guys. This is London now. East London. And this is France. Look at these wonderful assets to the European economy. Wonderful businesses. Tables and kiosks in the middle of the street. Lots of rape, gang rape, child rape, frequent sexual assaults, casual stranger-on-stranger violence in the streets, robberies, no-go zones, unofficial Sharia courts. Really great fucking job, guys. This is the insane agenda that they have forced onto Europe. And it's very difficult trying to figure out who they are exactly. I mean, it's the EU, obviously. I mean, these people having the Bilderberg meetings and just, beyond that, it kind of scatters. There's no accident of that. I mean, these people have infected the media. I mean, they're the ones running these ridiculous narratives that just keep us occupied and keeping attention off them, using the regressive left. It's, a collusion, the most satisfactory answer I've got so far. It's a collusion of corporatists, mega bankers, and politicians driving down wages, bringing in new voter base, and whatever the bankers get. I don't know. This whole fucking thing is insane. It sounds so crazy, but it's definitely happening. The people of Europe did not vote for this. It's being forced upon them, and it actually started 30 years ago as part of this, multicultural diversity agenda. It's been going on for quite a while, and this, the whole idea of multiculturalism makes zero sense from start to finish. But that doesn't matter because, it sounds good. Oh, it's going to be so great. Diversity, you guys. We're going to bring in people from other countries and, all the colors of the rainbow. Hooray! Now, there's nothing wrong with allowing foreigners to migrate to your country, but for a reason. If they're coming there to work or, they have family or, whatever reasonable reason, sure. But multiculturalism or diversity, it's simply an effort to ship in people that are different races. And that's it. And basically non-white. I mean, this diversity shit, it's only happening in white countries. And of course, that's like a whole nother can of worms, the fuck white people agenda. But, setting that aside, how does that make any sense? I mean, what is the point of that? Why does any country in the world have to have all the colors of the rainbow represented? What is the benefit of that? I mean, why? And here's your first clue that there's something very off about this. For 30 years, these questions were never answered because anyone who dared to ask these questions is obviously racist. I mean, only a racist would ask such questions. Yeah, well, eventually people stop asking, right? I mean, you just pound the stupid message in, hard enough, and eventually it becomes the truth, that same old shit. You say something, enough times with enough frequency, and people just believe it. Multiculturalism has been going on for 30 years with disastrous results, and here's another very solid clue that something just ain't right with all this. Back in early 2011, Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, David Cameron, Prime Minister of the UK, United Kingdom, and Nicolas Sarkozy, the President of France, they all said that multiculturalism has just utterly failed. It's not working. It's a fucking mess. We need to stop.
In the UK, some young men find it hard to identify with the traditional Islam practiced at home by their parents, whose customs can seem staid when transplanted to modern Western countries. But these young men also find it hard to identify with Britain too, because we've allowed the weakening of our collective identity. Under the doctrine of state multiculturalism, we've encouraged different cultures to live separate lives apart from each other and apart from the mainstream.
And that speech was in late 2010, and he really nails it perfectly. And, Merkel says the same thing, so does the French president, and yet for some reason it just quickly turns around shortly after that. Sarkozy was voted out of office in 2012. Merkel just completely did a 180 and has secured her role in history as one of the biggest traitors of Germany in all of Europe. And David Cameron, not so much, but basically goes with the program, So apparently, if I can just theorize here, the globalists could feel their power slipping. Europe wasn't buying this multicultural crap anymore, and countries were showing signs of resistance. They needed to manufacture a new crisis, and lo and behold, the refugee crisis comes along. And there's actually a pretty good case to be made that these assholes had a pretty big hand in causing that war, the Syrian civil war, which created the refugee crisis, which they exploited. And the thing with Libya, for example, what happened with Gaddafi, quite a bit going on there, which I used to dismiss as, nonsense, that, the ominous they wanted Gaddafi gone to serve their interests. But, let's look at some facts. Now, the theory is that they got rid of Gaddafi to allow the flow of millions of migrants to come from all over North Africa and travel through Libya and other routes too, but it's mostly Libya, which, I mean, this part is not theory. These are the routes they are taking. They come to Libya, hop on a boat, float to Italy, and make their way to Germany or Sweden or the UK. Most are going to Germany, because they got the best welfare. And, so, I mean, this is definitely happening. There's no denying it. Now let's go back to late 2010. And remember these dates, late 2010 and 2011. It's when everything went to shit, when the globalists made their move. So here's Gaddafi in 2010 talking with the Italian Prime Minister, Silvio Berlusconi, setting up some trade deal between the two countries. And right around this time, Gaddafi gives a speech in Rome, basically foreseeing the migrant crisis. And he says, talking to the EU, saying, look, if you guys pay me 4 billion euros a year, I will stop these immigrants from coming in to Europe. Libya is their entry point, he says, and I will stop it. Just cough up the dough. Now, look at the things he says, and note the date of this article, 2010. He says there's a dangerous level of immigration from Africa to Europe, and we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if Europe will remain an advanced and cohesive continent, or if it will be destroyed by this barbarian invasion. We must work together and prevent this from happening. Well, everything he said is happening right now. But, just imagine hearing this in 2010, trying to take this in, like some crazy African dictator talking about a barbarian invasion of Europe. I mean, like, what the fuck is this? Is this like a threat? Are you threatening us here? Like, what are you fucking what is this lunatic talking about? A bunch of African immigrants are just going to invade Europe? Get the fuck out of... Oh, and of course, you want 4 billion euros. Because, you're going to stop them, right? You care so much. What the fuck is he talking about? Get out of here.
Germany is facing a drastic number of refugees by the end of 2015, believed to be in the region of 1.5 million.
Well, here we are, 5 years later, and he even warned that if I go down, then Europe goes black, as he so elegantly puts it. Well, he was half right. I mean, black and brown. Everything he said came true. And, don't get me wrong. I mean, Gaddafi was not concerned about preserving Europe because deep down he cared about us in the West. He cared about himself and his own agenda, and if preserving Europe was part of that agenda, then great. I mean, he wasn't much better than Saddam Hussein. He did all the typical evil dictator shit. He would go into schools and just pick out young girls, just that one, snatch her up, use them as sex slaves. So he was not a nice guy. It wouldn't even be surprising to think that he was proposing this plan simply for the money. Just, use $3 billion to keep the immigrants from coming to Europe and then just pocket the other $1 billion. Nice little profit, right? And I'm sure that was part of the plan to overcharge us, but Gaddafi did have he had bigger plans in mind. He had a vision for North Africa. He basically wanted to rule over North Africa. He was a believer in the intellectual movement Pan-Africanism, which is basically a solidarity movement, strengthen the bonds in Africa, be united, that kind of thing. He also wanted to move Arab countries onto the gold standard, effectively changing their economies, and he was gaining a little traction with this. These are all things that make the globalists very worried. They did not like the sound of that, and what do you know? Gaddafi's dead within a year. The country is thrown into chaos. The migrant route to Europe is wide open, with a little help of NATO forces, of course. And NATO headquarters are located in Brussels, Belgium, by the way. Same as the European Union headquarters. Interesting. And I never used to believe this stuff either, but, these are all facts. I mean, these things happened. I'm not pretending to know all the details, but it's not really that much of a stretch to connect the dots on a lot of this stuff. And now that Hillary's emails have been made public, there's some pretty damning evidence in those that she'd been manipulating world events in her time as Secretary of State. The Benghazi report finally came out. This stuff is starting to come to light. In case you still don't see how obvious it is that this Syrian civil war was just a smokescreen to let in millions of migrants, and that is the number we're talking about here, millions, from all over the world into Europe. Let me just break this down. These people right here are obviously from Africa. I mean, we can all see that. There's no pretending that they're from Syria. They have nothing to do with the Syrian civil war. So how does that make sense? I mean, here is the very simple math. A civil war from Syria causes lots of refugees, which means welfare moochers from North Africa must be allowed to exist in Europe. 2 + 2 = 5. Hooray for multiculturalism. It doesn't matter if it makes sense. That's just that's multiculturalism. That's virtue signaling. Never makes sense. This is emotional manipulation that is taking place. They're not migrants. They're refugees. Oh, that sounds so much better, doesn't it? And you want to know what the big turning point for all this was? The thing that turned public opinion in a big way? Well, this picture right here of a dead kid. Oh, it's so terrible, isn't it? Virtue signalers came out of the woodwork to welcome the invading army. Even though, here's the truth of this. Thousands have drowned since this whole migrant crisis thing. I mean, they're encouraging them to come over, and more kids are drowning. But, again, facts never fucking matter to the virtue signaling crowd of regressive morons. And by the way, they really are encouraging these people to come to Europe. They have been spreading the word, sending out leaflets and whatever. And look at this billboard in Africa. Come rape bitches in Finland. You won't be punished. And even if this billboard was fake, and I'll leave a link to an article about it, it still wouldn't be inaccurate, now would it? I mean, these migrants are barely, if ever, punished for their horrendous crimes. I mean, how many people were even arrested after Cologne, after they had to force the government to even talk about it? I mean, Rotherham, that shit went on for years, and, still is. They made progress, but it didn't just, go away right after that story broke. Now let's move on to America, because it is happening in America too. Remember a few years back, we had our own migrant crisis, the child migrant border crisis, thousands of unaccompanied minors just showing up at the Mexican border. And here's something funny, they were mostly coming in from Central America. Seems odd. They're just shipping them in by the trainload. And why Central America? Well, it's a lot harder to ship them back. If it was Mexico, the border's right there, just send them back. It was another manufactured crisis, just like in Europe. The whole thing is eerily familiar. These long, dangerous migration routes, the exploitation of children to pull at our heartstrings. They also spread the word in these countries. News outlets in those countries reporting stories of kids reaching America, and then their parents get to come, and free welfare. It doesn't matter if you're illegal. It's just free everything. It just come. I mean, goddamn, that sounds familiar. I mean, this is so fucked up. What is wrong with these people? Why are they so intent on destabilizing and ruining Western countries? This is the fucking objective of these globalist monsters. I mean, what if this was your town, right? And these assholes just dumped hundreds or thousands of these people into your town, just can't even speak the language, just, not vaccinated, spreading disease, bunch of fucking crime. And, just an added kick in the nuts. You have to know that you're paying for them with your tax dollars. And if you dare complain, then you'll just be vilified or possibly arrested. You fucking racist. You deserve it. So goddamn racist. But fortunately, in America, it didn't go quite so swimmingly as it did in Europe. Because this is America, after all.
Hey, if you don't like America, then you can get out.
So after manufacturing this crisis, the Obama administration tried to shove the DREAM Act down our throats. Remember that a couple years back? It would have essentially just legalized all the illegal immigrants. All the illegals that he shipped in, well, just legalize. That was his solution to illegal immigration. Just legalize them. Then they won't be illegal anymore. I mean, for fuck's sake, the madness. Oh, and of course, it was full of crafty language that allowed them to say, no, that's not what's happening at all. Yeah, totally. We get it. Yeah, we can keep our doctor and all that. Yeah. Got it, Barry. Well, the American people didn't fall for it and rushed to the polls in 2014 to give the Republicans a landslide victory. And remember, this had nothing to do with Islamic terrorism. It was before the refugee crisis in Europe became front-page news. It was before Trump. Even back then, the American people stood up and said, whoa, not so fast, Mr. President. What the hell do you think you're doing here? And what do you know? The numbers drop after 2014. There's still some patriots left in America. And not only that, the federal agency, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE for short, didn't take this line down either. 10 ICE agents sued the Obama administration for his executive orders to essentially just tell them not to arrest illegal immigrants, only if they were violent criminals, just giving them all these tyrannical orders, just telling them not to do their jobs. It's just a bunch of other shit, go read the article. America just won't comply with the globalist agenda, it seems. Boy, are they frustrated. Obama and all the elites are not too happy about this. Oh, but make no mistake, they're still up to their old tricks. Obama is still shipping in immigrants from the Middle East, and he's shipping in Somalians. Yet another very simple math equation. Why? Why the fuck is he's shipping in Somalians. That has nothing to do with Syria, and I just like, holy fuck, Somalia. That country is in the running for the world's worst, most godforsaken shithole on the planet. And he's shipping in 700 of them a month. I mean, most of the governors are saying absolutely not. You are not putting them in our state. And he's just shipping them in anyway. I mean, what does he care? He's got 6 months left. Fuck it. So make no mistake, if we vote in Hillary, then our country is fucked. It's 4 more years of this shit. 4 more years of more terrorism, more Sharia, more illegal immigration. Just fucked. So how about we give a big middle finger to the globalist elite and vote in Trump?
We will no longer surrender this country or its people to the false song of globalism. No American citizen will ever again feel that their needs come second to the citizens of a foreign country.
Good luck with that.
We're going to win. We're going to win it for the people. We're going to win it for our country. We're going to make America great again.